You're listening to WorkWire, sponsored by Career Club and SHRM. Career Club has a range of services aimed at job seekers with an empathetic approach. Whether you are a job seeker yourself, know someone who is in job search, or an HR professional looking to bring a more empathetic approach to transitioning employees, check out career.club. If you are an HR professional seeking to enhance your skills, subscribe to SHRM and explore their extensive resources. Visit shrm.org. That's shrm.org.
Hello, everybody. This is Bob Goodwin with Career Club, joined by my good friend, Johnny C. Taylor Jr., the president and CEO of SHRM. Johnny, how are you?
I am doing wonderful. This is first quarter. Things are good. The market's performing. Life's good.
Yeah, if you only had more NVIDIA stock, right?
How about that? Then there's that, right?
No, it's so good to see you, and thank you as always. It's such a pleasure to be with you. So,
Likewise.
The feedback that we've been doing this for a little bit here on the WorkWire, and the feedback, that I get personally from folks is just really, really positive. And the opportunity for people to hear from you is very much appreciated. So, and I always enjoy being with you. So thank you.
I was going to say, wait a minute. I hear from us, by the way. And it's funny. I talked to someone the other day who mentioned, oh, yeah, I heard you on the WorkWire, da-da-da. And I just love the fact that you all don't just always agree. I really like it. You take on top of issues. And I said, well, hold on, because you're going to see more of it.
All right. Well, okay, since you just lit the fuse, let's go. So today's topic is really interesting. You and I were emailing a little bit on this, but it's about background checks. Now, I don't know if you knew this, but I was actually with First Advantage for a hot minute.
The company?
Yep, back in the day, looking after their retail vertical and also their nonprofit vertical.
Got it.
Okay. And so it was really, really interesting to me. So I got to learn a lot about that. Just the fact that when it's a regulated business, it's protected by the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and that, companies can't just do anything. But anyway, the nature of background checks is, on one hand, they clearly serve a purpose, right? You want to protect your customers. You want to protect your employees. You want to protect your brand. There's a lot safety. I mean, there's just so many good reasons to just make sure that, we know who's coming onto the payroll and representing our brand and doing the work of our business. Having said that, there's also some things that, at least in the evolving, talent market, workplace, our background checks kind of keeping up with an evolving talent pool. And then I want to weave in some DEI, IED kinds of issues into this. So that's our topic. We'd love to just start to get some top of mind thoughts from you, Johnny, as we think about background checks.
So let me just give you context let me start with, I have a bias toward background checks.
Okay.
So, and others can agree or disagree, and I understand all of the downsides, but no topic is clean, right?
If it was easy, we wouldn't need to do this.
We wouldn't be talking about it on the WorkWire, right? But we owned for a while a company and a portfolio of companies. I don't mean me, the company that I worked with, and I was the head of HR. We hired a guy who'd been convicted of rape. We did not do background checks. He happened to be African-American, not that all African-Americans are rapists or whatever, you get my point, but happened to be African-American, good guy, but all, we wouldn't have hired him if we thought he was a bad guy, actually a good performer, etc. We ran a 24-hour call center, which was predominantly female, within a predominantly female population. One particular night, one or two people on the very, very late night shift, two women there alone. One walks down the stairwell to go get some coffee from another floor, and guess what? She runs into him and he rapes her. And then we learned that had we simply conducted a background check, we would have known not only had he committed this crime before, but we would have learned that he was a registered sex offender.
Right.
We put our employee at risk. put aside what the settlement, the lawsuit cost us, it was the wrong thing for us to do. We could have still hired the guy because everyone needs to be able to work. You know how I feel on second chances. People have to find a way to provide for themselves and their families. But maybe we would have put in place certain precautions. Maybe we would have said he can only work when, there are X number of people in the building. Perhaps we would have allowed him to work remotely because it was a call center after all.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many things we would have done had we known. To look back and realize that we put those women's lives at risk when we could have done something to protect them informs the way I think about background checks. I have a 13-year-old daughter. I have 2 sisters, a mom. Like, it bothered me and still bothers me. So a little serious to start, right? But this is a serious matter.
Exactly.
We as employers have a right to do everything we reasonably can to provide you a safe workplace. And part of that, to me, doing your due diligence, is to conduct background checks. Now, we have to make sure that we're not just excluding people just because they've made a mistake in their lives. And we can narrowly tailor the hiring decision so that if you wrote a bad check or you did something that was, yes, violative of the law, but not enough to put other people's lives at risk, got it. We cannot. I'm a huge proponent of anything that prohibits background checks just generally. And there are certain crimes that I think we need to be able to go back for much further than the 7 or 10 years that some states cap it at, because I want to know if I have someone in my workplace who's predisposed to put people really at risk. So I don't even get to customers. I don't even care about the company's reputation. Fundamentally, we in HR have an obligation to protect people where we can when we bring them into our workplace. So now.
Yeah. No, so yes, safety, physical safety is, got to be like somewhere at the most basic level, right? That I can come to work and be safe. So you bring up a few things, though. One is there's various kinds of offenses.
That's right.
Right. Then, and we should probably just unpack that by itself. And then the second bit of it, you just alluded to it, is how far back can I go? How far back should I go? And then is there a matrix between sort of those two things, the seriousness of the offense and how far back, we should be looking?
Yeah.
I'll maybe kick this off a little bit.
Please.
I'm very much a second chance person too.
Yes.
And I've probably, just in full transparency, probably evolved over time in that one.
Hello, me too, because I'm a law and order guy. My history was not always bring people. It's like, if you committed a crime, you should pay forever. I used to be there. I'm not any longer.
And I have definitely moderated on that. Like if we want a better society, if we want lives to be changed, we have to provide the opportunity for lives to be changed. So if this is like just a black mark on your record, it's binary in, out, sorry, you just opted out forever, then how could you ever possibly, you've told them there is no other alternative, there is no other avenue for you to go pursue. You're going to go back to what works.
Right.
And so that to me is just fundamental. And I think, I'm probably catching up society in this regard. Like, we just need to be more forgiving.
Yes.
You talk a lot about, Johnny, about being an empath, and, and I think one of the reasons we get on well is we're both wired that way, but it's like, it's the right thing to do. It's, I think, the smart thing to do.
Yes.
And, if you think about somebody who has been incarcerated, and depending on what their background is, like where they grew up. So I'm just going to be super stereotypical for a second. Say like the South Side of Chicago, which has a reputation for not being the easiest place to grow up.
Yep.
Well, if somebody gets in trouble there, serves time, and then they are blacklisted essentially from working again, right? Because background checks, and it is what it is. Well, not only does that individual not get better,
right,
his or her family doesn't get better, and then
That's
by extension, the community doesn't get better. But
right.
communities are just the accumulation of individual lives and family units, however that family unit is constructed. So when somebody is given the opportunity to pivot and change the arc of their life, it's not just them, it's their family unit. And then by extension, the community becomes different. Look at what Bob used to be in trouble. Bob used to be a gangbanger. Bob used to be whatever. Look now. He's now working at this company. He's providing for his family. And like they're just a completely different life path. Like who could possibly be against that except companies perceive risk?
Right.
And they're like, all I know is, I think I know, an employer might say, is if I don't hire people who already have a checkered past, therefore perceived higher risk profile, why would I increase my risk profile if I don't have to?
Bob, can let me just get on that. Our data at SHRM showed something that really shocked me. I could not believe it. More employers are willing to hire people who have committed or been, committed crimes in the past than are employees.
Say that again. Say that again.
So you have companies where our data says the HR leader, the CEO says, let's give people second chances. The person sitting next to that person says, I get it, but I would just as soon not have my wife sitting next to an ex-con in the workplace. Mm-hmm. So the biggest pushback is, that concept of NIMBY, not in my backyard. Like everyone wants you to be there, but not the word next to me. Mm-hmm. Believe it or not, WorkWire audience, the biggest pushback is with people. So it's a great concept, second chances, until the person sitting next to you has just gotten out of prison for bank robbery. You're like, oh, well, not that. Like, okay, driving too fast, maybe. But there are categories, and I know we're going to talk about it, where the people are like, I don't want that person. So it is the biggest hurdle I have found. It used to be employers didn't want to do it from a pure risk profile standpoint. Increasingly, it is employees don't want to because of their fears. You don't have to do anything right now. You open any newspaper in any major city right now, crime is the biggest topic being discussed. Yeah. People are afraid. So once I decide that I'm afraid of crime, I'm sure as heck not interested in you bringing people into my workplace who are from the criminal justice system.
Mm-hmm. So let's unpack that a little bit. And this was actually, for anybody listening to this, was way deep in the origin story of the WorkWire.
Yes.
Right. You had brought to me somebody that was in Michigan, I believe, and had gotten their law degree while in prison and wanted to clerk for a judge. And the judge said, okay, that's cool. But the other judges were like, Nope. It's kind of to your point. Like you're going to taint the purity of what we do by introducing this convict into our midst.
Yep. It's not as simple as we think it is, right?
But what struck me about this, and I had a very strong reaction, like that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. And then you go, yeah, Bob, but what if this guy was a sex offender? You still think that? And then how long ago was it? And what rehabilitation has this person been through? So the guy that did bank robbery yesterday and sitting next to me today, probably not a fan of that idea.
Right.
But it raises a really interesting point. One that I don't think that there's a definitive formula for or anything like that. But I appreciate the SHRM data that says, okay, because of fear, how can we educate people or at least create some, I'm probably going to use the wrong word, Johnny, boundaries, but something that provides them with that feeling of safety.
Right.
While at the same time providing opportunity, diversifying the workforce, et cetera.
It's complicated, as is like most of these issues. They are really complicated. But I will tell you, at the end of the day, we have to, from a risk standpoint, we've got to protect. I'm going to go back to what I say. You got to protect the workplace. But I have to balance that, as you pointed out, about opportunities for people. Grace and mercy is a phrase, words that you and I absolutely embrace. And I think most people do. Your point's well taken. We've got to educate people. I have found that once you have, if you ask me, I've got two candidates, one who has a criminal background, one who doesn't, which one would I hire, assuming all things equal? The person without the background, right? I mean, I get it. But if you educate me, if I got to know that person, if I understood the circumstances around which, how long ago, to your point, what was the nature of the crime, et cetera, maybe I'd feel differently. But let me just challenge you. There are some crimes, it's easy, and the difficulty in saying, let's pick the class of crimes, because, well, I could hire someone who wasn't engaged in a crime against a person, right? Physical crimes scare you. But if Madoff was still alive, who would want to work next to him? Mm-hmm. Okay, purely, he didn't take anyone's life directly, et cetera. It was a financial crime. But who in the Workwire audience would say, oh, I'd be cheering for Madoff to have a second chance had he lived and gotten out of prison? The answer is very, very few of us. Right. Very few. And that was a purely financial crime. So I just don't, it's not as easy. And I've lived in this HR world for a long time. Every time we've tried to establish the boundaries and lead with empathy, our own biases get pushed to the edge, right? Do I want to hire someone who wrote bad checks or embezzled from their last company? Maybe, as long as it's not in finance. If it's not in HR, because you have too much access to confidential information, right? So my issue is not that you committed a crime, it's that I question if you are trustworthy.
So challenge me on this one, Johnny, because where my mind goes in all of this is, I would not want the argument to stop unless you can answer the edgiest of all edge cases. Right. So Bernie Madoff is fairly singular in American crime, rape, murder. But if we just looked at the total distribution of people that have at some point in their lives been part of the incarceration system, the vast majority of those people, it's going to be drug crimes and things like that, right? Where it's, and how long ago was it? So we can address a really big chunk of the problem without having to have the perfect answer that doesn't exist for every other potential edge case that's out there. So I would be an advocate of just being, at some level, pragmatic and say, well, let's do the parts that we can do and work on the parts that still require more thinking without having to figure the whole ball of wax out first to be able to do good.
Well, and that's what's happening in HR practices around the country and indeed around the globe, is the right answer is to do a case-by-case review. And there are all sorts of circumstances, even with some pretty heinous crimes. People who've, as I said, committed sexual assault. One could easily argue, well, I don't care how long ago it occurred, and I don't care about the circumstances, that person should not be in the workplace. And I'm suggesting to you, as I did at the outset, that maybe there's a different way to allow them to work, and they just don't work under conditions where they could put people at risk. Maybe it's a fully remote employee, et cetera. So I think it's a case-by-case analysis. That is how most of us in the HR world practice now. It takes a little bit more time to analyze it, to know all of the circumstances, because even when it appears clean, it may not be clean. What if you were a home health aide who actually stole from a 90-year-old person, and maybe you're only stealing $500 a month from their pension? That's still a really bad crime. And that's not exactly the person I'd want working next to me. You know what I mean? So we look at the circumstances on an individualized basis. That's the way to do this. And therefore, to go all the way back to what we started with, I do believe in background checks. I think that not knowing that person committed what appears to be not a big crime, $500 a month, $6,000 from a 90-year-old person who had dementia and you could justify anything and say, so why do we need to know that? Because you do. And I think that's where I land is, Get the background check, get the information, and strong HR professionals will look at it and working with the hiring manager determine how to hire the person, not just blanket decide not to hire them.
Okay, let's pick up a couple other elements of background checks. One is an education check.
Yes.
So Bob says he's got an MBA from Harvard.
Yep.
He actually doesn't. In your HR career, did you ever have somebody that misrepresented their education credentials?
All of the time. And I remember actually having this conversation with someone I had to fire from my own team who lied about their credentials. I said, this isn't about you not having a degree. I actually would have hired you without the degree because personally, I don't care if you have a degree or not. I'm going to fire you because I can't trust you. Yeah. You lied about something that was of there was no significance to it. It was a silly lie. And so I can't trust you in HR. So yes.
So I think you just answered the question. If you had, your chief marketing officer was amazing, doing a great job, and somewhere you found out that he actually didn't have that degree,
right,
doing a good job, been there for 5 years, you would fire that person?
I would. Now, I can't say anything blanket, right? Back to
fair enough.
Case by case analysis. I know some of y'all thought you got me, but really, I'm like, no, I would look at it, but probably particularly as a leader. And remember, the values of our organization, fundamental to everything, is that we need to be able to trust you. And this would make me question everything that you do and say. Now, that doesn't mean, and this is where the second chances comes in, that person should forever be barred from working for any other company, any other organization in the world. They should learn that I have lost the trust of Johnny and SHRM, but that doesn't mean that Johnny and SHRM should prevent you from getting a job anywhere else for the rest of your world because you told that one lie. Just tell the truth going forward.
Yeah. Do you have a point of view on continuous background checks? So like we did it at the beginning of employment, but you know what? We just like to do every other year or some kind of just make sure nothing's changed since our relationship began.
So I know some are not going to like this, but I absolutely do. I think it is just like random drug testing. I mean, I absolutely believe that it's good hygiene. What if during the interim you were convicted of a crime, but because the jails were filled or some set of circumstances, you're convicted, but you're not incarcerated. You're only incarcerated on the weekends, which happens a lot, especially in financial crimes when there are no crimes against the person. So Monday through Friday, you could be working in my finance department, a convicted felon for embezzling at your last job, but they didn't convict you until after I hired you. So you were fired, you were tried, all of this while you're working for me. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. So I am a huge advocate of maybe call it random, maybe you call it periodic, whatever you want to do, but checking in to ensure that the person who works with you is in fact the person you think is working with you and has not made some really bad decisions that could impact the safety of your employees or the risk profile of your company. I'm okay with that. Yeah. But again, you can't just blanket say, and if we do a background check and learn that you have been involved with the criminal justice system since we hired you, we're automatically going to fire you. That is not something I agree with.
Got it. And then where does, I generally don't know this, where does doing like social media and like following you on social media and, oh, by the way, I find out that you're a white supremacist or you've got some other less than desirable quality. Is that legal? And then two, right. Is it practical?
Well, it's a lot legal, especially if you put it out there, right? So people forget that social media is I might not go looking for it. It comes to me. And what we've seen, you want to talk about white supremacists? Well, we've seen people who've made some fairly anti-Semitic comments as of late. And one of the big law firms withdrew the offer of a young African-American woman from NYU, I believe it was, law school, just earlier last year, after October 7th, where she went on social media and literally made some really, really outrageous statements against the Jewish people. That job should have been rescinded, period. And that was, we realized it because that law firm was doing its own form of social media background check.
Yes.
And people don't know this, but roughly we've heard somewhere between 70 and 80% of the Fortune 500 companies regularly conduct background checks. And this is one, not just at time of hire, but during the process. And I've had people challenge me, Johnny, that's horrible. Well, let me say something. What if Johnny Taylor, the CEO of SHRM, went online, call it Facebook, and by the way, I'm not on social media, but if I were, and I went onto a social media, and I decided to trash women, my board should call me on that. And I could argue, I was doing it on my own time. No, 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 no. You're affecting the reputation of our profession and of our organization, and we're not going to pay you and allow you to do it. Oh, but you didn't get my permission to do a background check. No, you put it out on blast. You put it on public on social media. So I remind especially the younger generation that you now have a permanent record that anyone can go find and review and make employment decisions. And so, yes, it's legal, and it's actually one of the most dangerous areas for employees. As you think social media is not background checkable, you're wrong. We do it all the time. Sometimes we won't tell you. We'll just do it and exclude you from the hiring.
Let's talk about rank and file employees, though. I'm a software engineer buried deep in the bowels of some company, coding, whatever. Like I'm not damaging the reputation of XYZ company per se, because I'm not a high profile employee of the company or in the public spotlight. But I'm off, doing misogynistic things or racist things or whatever the thing is. Like, should that person be called to account on that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I feel very strongly about it because you're low level, deep down into the organization until you're not, until it hits the floor. Right. And then I get dragged with you. Think about, and this woman by title was a vice president. Remember the woman who became the Karen,
Yes.
right? She's out walking her dog. And I hate that term, by the way, but that's what we began to know her as, walking her dog. She gets into interaction with a black guy in the middle of Central Park. And all of a sudden she loses her job. And she lost her job before a criminal charge was filed. So even if they had done a background check, it wouldn't have shown up. She was on her own time, et cetera. But guess what? The company, because she showed up on social media and in the mainstream media, decided that we don't want that. And this was notwithstanding, I think she may have had a vice president title, but everybody had a vice president title in our organization. She wasn't, a direct report to the CEO or the CEO or anything, but they got rid of her. So you are always, no matter where you are within an organization, if you engage in behavior. So I'm going to say this real quick because I was tickled. Someone challenged me on it. And I said, well, what if you found out one of, call it the technologist, to use your example, low-level coder within IBM was on the dark web spouting all sorts of negative things about African Americans, post George Floyd, the month after that. You'd be okay with that company? No, you wouldn't. Stop it. Stop it. You know what I mean? You'd say, that's not the person who holds up our values as a company. That's not the type of person we hire, and you'd be gone. So I don't think it's title. Now, obviously, the more senior and public your role is, the even more sensitive you have to be. But wherever you are in the organization, if you don't live and uphold the organization's values, then you shouldn't work there.
Okay, I'm going to channel Johnny Taylor for a minute. On the one side, freedom of speech. You want to go do that? And it's not illegal? Go for it. Employment at will. But you want to work here? No. So that decision, see, but that decision has consequences, and you should be open to absorbing the consequences. If you want to go rant and be a weirdo and say whatever you want to say, okay,
have at it.
First Amendment right, have at it. But that doesn't mean that we have to employ you.
And it's kind of that simple. Decisions have consequences, right?
Yes.
And I'm glad you said that, because that is the dilemma. I remind people all the other time, yes, you have a right and the company has rights. And so we're going to exercise it. But back to background checks. I'm glad you pointed out there are financial background checks, which is one area that I just, in closing, want to say I'm very sensitive to. We talk about criminal background checks. We talk about social media checks and all of that. There was a period when a lot of companies, and there still are some, who do credit checks. as a form of background check. And what we know is the data has suggested that that disproportionately impacts female employees, women, because so many of them, at least historically, and the math is changing, were stay-at-home moms. Guy meets a younger woman, leaves you, your credit's destroyed.
Mm.
And so you should not be foreclosed from getting job opportunities at the very moment that you need to get a job to provide for your family, because your husband was the breadwinner and you were a homemaker, and now your credit is destroyed. So we're very, very careful. I am not a big proponent of background checks on credit, background checks. I'm just not. That doesn't mean I'm right. It means
Yeah,
that
I mean, the theory is that if your finances aren't in good shape,
right.
you're potentially a theft/embezzlement risk to shore up your lacking financial situation. Last question though on background checks
Yep.
is what actually two drug laws are changing in the United States pretty quickly. They're liberalizing marijuana, obviously. So, when I was at First Advantage, this drug panel was very common, and
Yes.
marijuana was definitely part of the drug panel. There's well, it's not legal in my state yet, but I kind of acknowledge this is the reality, and the train's left the station. It's just a matter of time till it gets to me. How would you have employers think about drug testing?
The tough one, because frankly, anything that alters your mood, if it's alcohol abuse, drug abuse, prescription drug abuse, right? Any of those things are probably not good for business. So the general rule around that is, and we can't forget, marijuana is still not legal under federal law.
Correct.
So no matter what your state says, you still have that as an issue that people, someone I know thought they could just walk into the airport. And you're like, you do know that that's federal grounds, even though it sits in your state and you can be arrested for bringing marijuana onto an airport ground. So anyway, I think that personally and professionally, my opinion is that where it is necessary, if you're using a vehicle at work, if you're using major machinery that could cause death to yourself or injury to others. So I think there are some circumstances where it is totally appropriate. And these are not small. Like if I don't want my physician, I want my physician and my nurse to be drug tested. I do. Mm-hmm. Just fact, because, I do, for the reasons that all of us want to. So to a blanket, everyone is drug tested is probably not a good idea, but a blanket, no one is drug tested, because even if it's legal in your state or your jurisdiction, that doesn't mean certain roles require an enhanced level of safety. And that's why I would use background checks.
Well, which is also to your earlier point on random drug testing. So
right.
I know how to prep for the test and do whatever and game the system. But so on some random Tuesday afternoon, it's like, Bob, can you come over here for a minute? It's like, oh, crap, I wasn't planning on this.
Right.
So I think that back to baseline safety for the individual, people that they're around, their customers, like, I don't know how you could be against that. Last thing, and this is actually how our conversation got started. We've been talking about kind of all the official channels for doing background checks, but there's the whole back channel thing, and that can work in both directions, right? So as a career coach, like if somebody was going to be interviewing with Johnny Taylor, I would be telling, well, first of all, they could call me and say, Bob, tell me what Johnny's like. He's great. You're going to love him, whatever. Go check you out on social media and do all these things. And I'd be like, you're an idiot to not prepare and do your due diligence on the hiring manager, the executive team, whatever. But you should be doing your due diligence. On the flip side, and this is where it got contentious on a LinkedIn post the other week, is it cool if the hiring manager sees that Johnny's connected to Brenda and he calls, and I'm going to hire Brenda. Hey, Johnny, tell me about Brenda. Like, good egg. Should I hire her? Anything I need to know about? And that kind of lit a firestorm.
I saw.
To me, it's reality. It's like, Why are we doing these official background checks? Because we're trying to get some sense for who is this person that we're bringing in the organization. People hire people. You know
Yep.
this person. I don't know this person as well. What can you tell me? That to me is just like massively obvious, but not everybody would necessarily see it that way.
Well, and listen, I get it. All of us have enemies. All of us have haters, people who you've not done anything to in the world who would just as soon hurt your job chances or whatever, just because they're unhappy in their own lives, whatever, right? Envy, jealousy, whatever. So it is employers who do it, and we do it a lot. We do it in part because if I call 99% of the companies in America to do a background check, they're going to give you what we call name, rank, and serial number. Is the person eligible for hire or not? That's all. We will not give any context. The person could have fought their boss in the middle of the lunchroom. I mean, we've seen this, right? But if I talk to, name her, Mary, who was at the company at the time, who witnessed the fight, she will tell me what happened, right? Yeah. And so almost out of necessity, employers are relying heavily on these sorts of background checks. The challenge for the employers, you got to make sure that you can remove fact from fiction and people's own biases. So I've done it. I'll check and say, and you know what, Bob, come on. Listen, when you and I first met, and I considered doing this show with you, I called around. Hey, is this guy a good guy? Like, am I going to get a gotcha question? Is he an ethical person? Like, he doesn't have to agree with me, but I got to make sure, it is the normal way that we unofficially background check. It's the norm. We look at, without even talking to someone, I sometimes can look at so who are you connected to? Mm-hmm. High-quality people or questionable people? Like it's just the way the world happens. You called it. It's reality. I would just encourage all of you listening today, be very careful. Know that everyone has, if you've worked more than a year in corporate America, call it that, or anywhere, there's someone out there who'll say something negative about you. Yes. So you've got to take the totality of what you hear. People will speak negatively about Bob because they once worked for Bob, and maybe that person should have been fired, but they're forever going to say Bob was a bad manager. Mm-hmm. So you got to make sure you figure out what truth is if you're going to make hiring decisions based upon these unofficial backgrounds.
Okay, so just to go down the ladder here, it is legal.
Yep.
Ethics is in the eye of the beholder, but in your view, there's nothing that is glaringly unethical about an employer doing that.
Yep.
Then it comes down to kind of judgment and discretion and realizing that, to your point, I can't imagine Johnny Taylor has any haters, but just for argument's sake, that somebody would potentially say something negative, and to do that, as you say, in the totality, dip the stick in the water in more than one place.
That's right.
You want to find out what the water's really like. So, right. So,
and let me just say,
I'm really glad we're talking about this because, my comment on social media is like, maybe my moral compass is on the fritz right now, but I don't even know why we're talking about this.
Right.
I call it due diligence. But there were some people, in fairness, because I want to be respectful to not everybody sees the world the way that I do. Some people really thought of it as being unethical because of the opportunity that you're going to find that hater. And now I'm not going to get a job that I should have gotten because somebody's got a vendetta, an agenda, whatever, against me. And that didn't feel fair to some people.
And let me just say this in short. Violently agree with people raising it. I saw that same post and all of everything but I will say this. If you've gotten to the point where I'm doing a background check on you, I want you as an employer. Yeah. So I'm not, even if one person says something negative and I now have 8 people who said positive things, I'm going to put that in perspective as a hiring manager and say, maybe this person just doesn't like him or her. They have an axe to grind, whatever. What we're talking about is we're trying to identify, are there things that we need to be aware of that may not quite have risen to the level of criminal liability. I'm going to tell you something that you run, but we had an employee at an organization in which I worked who stole blindly from us tens of thousands of dollars because the local prosecutor was backed up with serious crimes. And this is not where I currently work. It's a former employer. The prosecutor said, I just don't have the resources to go after this now former employee. So this person does not notice I'm protecting gender, everything, so that you can't identify them. But this individual, therefore, has no criminal record. But without a doubt, they stole tens of thousands of dollars. So new prospective employer who happens to know me called and said, what do you think about X? And I said, well, off the record, let me tell you, you're not going to find a criminal background check. Lovely person will charm you out of anything, including tens of thousands of dollars. And I was thanked. So these things work when they're supposed to work. And the person who you get this from trusted me. That's why they called me. That's how you get unofficial background checks, right? So my friend would have hired this person into a very senior sensitive role without having gotten the information from me, because a criminal background check would have not indicated anything.
There you go. All right. Well, as is we usually do, everything of this is complicated. It requires judgment, discretion, thought, but I appreciate the opportunity to discuss hard topics with you, Johnny. I know, as I said at the beginning, our audience appreciates the ability to kind of walk around some issues that aren't always easy to understand. There's usually not one right answer to things. So with that, I appreciate you as always. So thank you. Come on, WorkWire.
Right, the WorkWire.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening today. We hope you have a wonderful and blessed day. We'll see you on the next episode of the WorkWire. Thank you, Johnny.
Check out career.club for personalized help with your job search. Visit shrm.org to become part of the largest human resources organization worldwide.